Hello everyone. In this video I want to speak about the current Mars-Uranus square. The exact transit is here in the US tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon. I often find with Mars transits, if there are events that will manifest, oftentimes the bulk, the depth of the transit is experienced a degree or so before, 2 or so degrees before the actual transit. I've noticed that. Nevertheless, we're in the energy field right now, and when Mars passes Uranus, we're still going to be in this energy field. So I want to speak about what's happening as we're moving into this square and what's kind of unfolding after this square. So a couple of things to define. We have Mars in Aquarius moving into a square with Uranus and Taurus. So it's moving into a last quarter phase square. A square is not a square is a square. The last quarter phase is the final square before we complete the cycle. And there's carried in the archetype of this square a quality of turning point. The crisis, the tension that manifests within this square is a sense of, I need to really break free, throw off, turn really 90 degrees from the direction that I've been going, and be open to a new way of thinking, a new perspective. It's a cardinal turning point in the journey where we've almost completed an entire cycle. And this says, to complete this cycle, you have to throw off the precedent, all that you've built, all that's been established, and be willing to see things in a new way. This is further emphasized with the fact that we're looking at Aquarius and Uranus, which as well carries that vibe, breaking from precedent, looking at things from a new lens. So here's what I want to share about this transit. It's particularly strong when we're building into the transit. It's in general, any transits before the exacting of that transit. It's when all the energy is building and we can really feel it as if there's something that's yet to be resolved. I had a very interesting dream, which I feel resonates with the energy of this transit. I was talking to some man, and I don't know if I was saying it or he was saying it, but the conversation said something to the likes of, our higher self, or in our true self, in our true nature, anger is not appropriate, meaning not like it's wrong, but it doesn't land. It's not relevant because we couldn't get angry. And what that means is there would be no state of perception, there would be no relationship to life wherein anger would be relevant or purposeful. It's like saying God gets angry. But in the manifestation of anger, it is absolutely necessary to fully meet it. And I don't know what the wording was. It was to fully meet it and give it over, meaning not to suppress it, not identify with it, but fully meet it. And the juxtaposition of those two statements, fully meet your anger, right? Like don't suppress it, but also the recognition that in our awakened self, anger is not relevant. It says something to me very profound. So let me unpack this, and I want to start by really clarifying the first part of that I received. That anger doesn't make sense. It doesn't exist in an fully awakened state. I want to be very clear. It doesn't mean as you're awakening you shouldn't get angry or that anger won't happen. It happens. That's a part of the path. In fact, that's a part of the second statement. But there's an understanding that is very important. The reality of anger implies a consciousness in opposition. Right? It implies there is a problem here. Anger and the directed object of that anger implies a state of war. Generally, it feels very justifiable in the moment. In fact, in all cases where we act upon our anger, it feels very justifiable. The sense of me, them, or us and them, or there's something to fight here, that is oftentimes very justifiable in the moment, which is what makes that's why it feels so good to act on anger in the moment. Later on, no. But it implies that perception. There is a conflict here that I need to fight. Or not fight, but suppress it and deal with it, right? Any state of anger implies a misperception. Again, let's not use this to suppress or judge the manifestation of anger. What I'm wanting to point to is the essential teaching, what anger is. So we can learn to embrace everything as it is, meet it, and also not give it more meaning than it has. It's a very important approach in my view. So the manifestation of anger is, by its very nature, a disruption, a movement away from proper or clearer perception. In clear perception, there's an understanding that nothing is happening to me. There are no battles here. That there isn't something to be worried about or something to be angry about. In clear perception, there's a greater appreciation for the perfection of all unfolding, and the appreciation for the gift and the healing that is offered in each experience. Again, horrible things happen and we feel angry. But really, this is up to each one of us only. We are never to tell anyone else how to act or behave. On our own journey, where that anger manifests, there's also a profound opportunity to see that there's a healing path right before us. And this brings us to the second statement. Anger's here. It is if the essential truth is there is no conflict, especially in Aquarius, suppression. All the suppressed content can be coming up right now, where we feel like we're suppressing ourselves, we're not being ourselves, where we feel othered, where we feel like an outsider. All the ways in which we can project onto our environment or onto other people the blame for us not feeling free. It's them. It's you. It's the circumstance, and thus I need to fight it or break free from it in order to find freedom. This can be very strong right now, but you can just recognize the anger arises however it shows up for us. There's this beautiful place where we become a witness of it. That witnessing of it doesn't mean it goes away or that we've found the answer to it. But the witness is sort of a statement of insight, of trust, of wisdom, that simultaneously acknowledges, okay, there's anger, and I'm not upset for the reasons I think. I don't actually know what this is about. I have my projection, my story, but I don't really understand this. The anger itself speaks to a present moment short-sightedness. We don't see clearly. And so to not suppress it, but to not become identified with it, actually leads to a profound amount of healing, because that anger at the core speaks to a raw energy that wants to be released. Right? Life, living, freedom. What is it like to see this differently? What is it like to live where I know myself as free, where I'm not seeing obstacles? Really, a useful interpretation of obstacles are really the obstacles that arise in our mind relative to our perceptions, not actual obstacles. Thus, the obstacles are what's arising. And we meet that with curiosity. That witness consciousness, which is the gift of Aquarius and Taurus, also says I can stay stable. I'm not going to create some kind of excited external firework type of event or experience. We don't need to do that. We often think we need to, like a child that will make drama out of anything. Feel upset, everything's crazy, everything's bad, everything's a drama. But we don't have to do that. We can witness what's arising and actually stay cool. And thus it's also very good to recognize if there's energy that needs to move and it feels very charged, there is a way to bring our mind to a very refined, pure state of connection. This could be our creative work. This can be sports, running, any kind of activity that really brings us into a more visceral, I'm connecting with this raw energy, being in a peak state. This can also, however, almost become a way of running from oneself. There are certain psychological patterns where peak performance states, or extreme sports, for example, or extreme experiences where we're just like in the moment, present, really intense, are sort of ways of finding a sense of excitement and freedom, but not actually meeting ourselves. Like, there's still content in our life that feels suppressing. So we turn to these things to find the freedom, but it's almost like a metaphor for our freedom. We're not actually finding it. So these can be useful ways of outletting energy if they're understood as that. In essence, what it means is we're moving energy and we're creating space from the perceived object of our triggers. We're creating space from the perceived object that is enslaving and keeping us suppressed. Because again, we don't know why we're upset. We don't really understand what's actually going on underneath our own projections. We love pointing to external cause. So, to actually come back to ourselves, what's revealed is a very profound state of awareness, which says everything's exactly where it needs to be. Everyone is placed and positioned exactly where they're meant to be. And thus we're all reflecting back to each other the very places where we have the opportunity to liberate and wake up together. By recognizing that we share the journey, we're a part of the same grid, right? And we're just holding these pieces for each other. Where there was otherwise war and tension between two, it becomes, oh, here's where we're waking up together, and that true friendliness of, oh, this is where we're walking each other home. If I can abstain from pulling out my sword in offense or in defense even, and recognize the greater picture, the greater friendliness that's unfolding here, it frees up a lot of space. I become free, you become free. There's a pathway that opens up that can't open up if we're bound in control. If we're bound in control and in the strong adherence to our perceptions of obstacles, of being limited, of being stuck. That's one thing that Mars doesn't like. Mars doesn't like to feel stuck. You can't, because Mars is where we need to be an agency to be making choices and engaging with our soul path moment by moment. And so the way to use this need to remain unstuck is to realize this stuckness is a projection. And so let me see from a greater perspective, greater point of view, right? Greater vantage point. And understand the unfolding, the liberation happening. So things aren't as personal. What wants to emerge during this time is a lot more energy to walk forward. And this can free up a lot of, if we approach this is a very important message. I would almost want to just like skip to this part of the teaching. If we can meet all of our dreams of fear, all of our memories of conflict and violence and opposition, where they are strong in our life right now, if we can meet it very consciously as reflecting archetypal dynamics that are ready to be released, and they need not be played out any longer, literally. They need not be played out on an actual battlefield in our relationships, in whatever conflicts are present for us. If we can see they're pointing to an opportunity for liberation, in staying as the observer and in staying in a consciousness of togetherness, there's an immense amount of healing and opening of energy. And then we'll begin to understand, we'll begin to see almost like what's been wanting to happen all along. As this happens, Mars continues to move and moves towards Saturn. And so this becomes more of a very concrete crystallization. Don't be rushing to concrete your plans right now, right? There's certain things, of course, you can do. It's very clear. There's a lot of content arising. If we're just kind of with the process and with the things that feel unclear, and we're meeting it as observers with a consciousness of friendliness and even excitement, trusting that whatever game we're playing, there is freedom and liberation on the other end of it. This will really show us over the next week or so as Saturn is joined by Mars and by Venus, which is going to be a very powerful, very potent time for us, very constructive and deeply reflective, and a practically engaging time as well. This is when we'll see essential choices being made and maybe plans beginning to really reveal themselves in clearer ways. So the invitation is to stay with this content and to really appreciate the immense opportunity in this transit for liberation, for accessing more raw power, more energy, more freedom. I often find in myself that the energy of lethargy and depression, while I can often correlate it to actual lack of sleep, on a deeper level, this is something that manifests for us when we're suppressing ourselves. And when the moment we find that freedom, we can actually feel our nervous system feel so much more relaxed and peaceful. So while this is a Mars transit, I also strongly suggest, getting exercise, doing good things for your nervous system, but not being stupid about it. Stupid being a Mars word, meaning rushing into things head first without thinking. It's again where there's a tendency to think, if I can just push my boundaries and get really extreme, I can get some freedom and move energy. That's where accidents happen. When we do that to our body, when we do that to other people, that's where we make mistakes that we then will learn from, which is great from that perspective. But to move energy, but to not be trying to push ourselves through, the liberation's happening in the mind. It's not happening in the body. It's not happening in the physical world. It's an internal liberation happening. So the blessing here is to meet all the content, all the dreams, all the energetics that are manifesting, because Aquarius corresponds to the astral plane. So there are, astral dynamics, different pieces manifesting in the psychic sphere that can feel very stressful. This is a time period where a lot of freedom and liberation, of tension and suppressed content can be opening for us. Enjoy.